Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Blame It on Marketing with Emma and Ruta. We are joined by Timi, who's going to introduce himself in a moment. Timi's been on the podcast before, and we're very excited to have him back. And in this week's episode, we are going to be discussing the CRO role. Oh, God. Ruta and I have wanted to talk about this for ages. Before we get into it, Timi, over to you. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Emma. Hi, Ruta. Thanks for having me back. It was a blast the last time. Hopefully, I don't undo all that good work this time. But yeah, so I'm Chief Revenue Officer at Charlie HR, which is a great company that helps small businesses practice great HR through our software and our services. I took an unconventional route to my CRO role because I started my career as a journalist, then a copywriter, then a marketer, then a revenue leader. So hopefully that unconventional background gives me some perspective. But I've also worked with a lot of conventionally evolving CROs. Let's say. No, I think I'm very commercial actually, and it's
Okay.
one of the things that I think both gave me some advantages early in my career when I was a copywriter and a journalist and all of that, but also kind of proved to be a blocker in many ways.
We started talking about this randomly. I don't even know what episode it was on, but I just had a little meltdown being like, yeah, CROs are just senior salespeople and they don't give a crap about the rest of the funnel. And then I had a little moan about it on LinkedIn, obviously. And then Emma and I were like, yeah, we should really talk about this. And I was like, ooh, Timi has just been promoted to CRO. This is perfect because I know your background. Timi and I used to work together in marketing. So it's great to have you on. But what is going on with the CRO role as you see it? Like, my perception, it's a senior marketing role. Should it be that? Sorry, senior sales role. Should it be that? Should it be more? I don't know. Am I expecting too much?
I don't think you are. I think you're absolutely right. The default is a kind of sales mindset. It's interesting, even when I get approached for roles or by recruiters in general, like exec search people, all of their lines of reasoning, all of their questions, all of their processes are geared towards the fact that, oh, this is someone who is like a quota bearing enterprise salesperson and just did that really, really well and then got promoted to CRO. They don't, they're not interested in strategic thinking, generally speaking. They don't, they just kind of, they care about what are the biggest deals you've handled, how how much have your sales teams exceeded quota attainment, what's your enterprise pedigree, what's your C-suite pedigree, and all those things can be important, but they also have a lot of problems which we can get into because I don't think that whether you come from a sales background or a marketing background, or I think even a customer background, because I have met one or two CROs with a customer team background, like I don't think it's a linear progression. I think becoming a CRO is and should be a transformative step where you're not just doing more of what you used to do, you think more of what you used to think, but better. It's a completely different frame of reference. It is an executive role where you have to think strategically at the highest level. And that means you're thinking from the level of enterprise value, you're thinking from the level of market conditions, you're thinking about at the level of competitor strategy or competitive strategy rather, and how and economic factors as well. And then you're thinking about how you can use your commercial acumen to formulate strategic approaches and strategic principles, strategic insights that helps the whole company succeed. But of course, you have primary responsibility for the commercial functions, but you shouldn't, I don't think you should be thinking solely, oh, what's the sales team going to do? How's the sales team going to achieve quota? Or indeed, oh, how's the marketing team going to bring it? I think it's more obvious when you say from the marketing side. Like if you said to people, oh, you're going to have a CRO, but they're just going to think about, oh, how's the marketing team going to create opportunities and generate leads? They'd be like, what? But I think it's that thing where because sales has this proximity to revenue, it blinds teams and companies and investors from a lot of limited thinking in the sales domain in a way that it would be much more easily exposed in other functions.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we see, especially in smaller startups, and I think we've probably all experienced this, is that you've got you know, if you come in and you're an outsider, you've potentially got a CRO, and there's like a handful of salespeople, and then that you've got this like almost mega junior marketer, and then you've got customer success completely over on the other side, and no one's necessarily working together particularly well. Your CRO's remit is absolutely to just drive new business only, and isn't necessarily, as you say, Timi, looking at how do you strategically make a difference to that revenue generating team, and how do you kick this up a notch. I think it's almost like you go in and you see a CRO, and I would almost say lots of them have this attitude of like, how do I just get this sales team performing? And that's where they see their kind of remit. Do you think, is that a fair way of putting it? And why do you think maybe some businesses kind of get this wrong? Is it actually just greedy salespeople's ambition? They're like, yeah, let me get the CRO title and then I'm done and I can go home. What do you think?
That's a fair question. I actually feel a lot for these sort of classic AE, hotshot AE people who become CROs, because I think a lot of the responsibility can be laid with the CEOs and the founders and the investors, because it's how they recruit for the CRO role. So, for example, one of the things that I've seen over and over again is when people are looking for a CRO, one of the first things they ask themselves is, how big is their black book? You know, or the contacts from these industries. And they don't think about the implication of what they're saying, because if what you're saying is the reason why this person is valuable is because they've dealt with X and Y and Z company before, then what happens if you hire them and those contacts move on, or stuff doesn't work out, or
We
your
know what
market
happens
shifts?
though, right? CMOs and CROs, the attrition rate is awful. Like 1.5 years is probably 1.5 to 2 years is the average of how long we stick around in companies. And it
Yeah,
happens again and again, doesn't it?
exactly. And I think we've all experienced that carousel of leaders. So it's a bit harsh to be someone who's been brought in, being told, "Oh wow, you're really good at selling. You know, you have this great black book, etc. Come in and do stuff." And then what you often find, as is the case with startups, is the real problem is not that they didn't meet enough people or get in front of enough prospects. The real problems are strategic. It's like your go-to-market motion is broken. You're trying to use channels that don't reach your particular buyers where they are, or don't influence them in the right way, or you have a product that is mismatched in some way with the market dynamics, the market needs, the market timing. These are all strategic, analytical, creative problems. They are not solved by knowing a lot of people. All that's going to happen is you're going to get in front of really powerful people, really influential people, and disappoint them, because they're going to be, well, this doesn't really work, except you don't have someone in the hot seat who either doesn't, who has the capability or has been primed to focus on those strategic problems. Instead, they're thinking, what I need to do is hobnob better, meet, build the relationship, deepen it, etc. And it's not that that's bad. I really don't want to sound like poo-pooing relationship building is super critical, especially for CROs, but it should not be seen as a crux of the role. So I think part of the responsibility is on the kind of sales background CROs who don't take the initiative to evolve and to respect and be curious about the other functions in the business. Like, I know you're the ones who bring in the money because you close the deals, but trust me, those deals don't happen if all the other functions don't play the game well. So it is in your interest to respect the work they do, to take it seriously, and to learn about it. But on the other hand, I think founders, CEOs, and investors need to evolve the way they think about the CRO role and the way they recruit for it. You need highly strategic, highly effective problem solvers regardless of whether they're a good AE or closer or have a great black book or are a great marketer or a great customer person. Those are the things you need first. And then everything else is a bonus, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, I feel like the current CRO role is kind of the product of the venture capital SaaS startup life cycle, essentially. So you need someone that's going to make big impact really quickly. You don't have time. You're going to run out of money because they're probably quite expensive as well. So you just go for someone that does have the black book and does have the context, because you're hoping to get that revenue in quickly. And then what happens after that point? You know what, we'll think about it when we get there. And then you're probably just going to fire them and get a new CRO, or you're going to decide that the role is not needed for the company anymore, which happens a lot, right? Marketing, I feel like we're more open about this in terms of like the CRO not caring about marketing or not even knowing very much about marketing sometimes. But I feel like the CS function and the product function is still not as vocal about what their involvement with a CRO should be. Could you give us an idea of maybe how you work with your CS and product function at Charlie, so we can have a think about how that might look for other people?
100%. I think, regardless of the structure you choose, kind of org chart wise, because I've seen a few, the absolutely most important thing is that the nexus of leaders that organize these groups need to have great relationships, need to trust each other, need to respect each other, need to communicate extremely well, and need to be supreme negotiators and compromisers, because there is tension between these functions. And that's why you end up with this rhetoric of sales-led, product-led, customer-led, because as people face these tensions, they tend to do what humans do best, resort to binary thinking. All right, screw it. I'm tired of this. Let's just, our product team has the best people in our opinion, so let's just put all our chips on them. But I think that is wrong, or I think it is unnecessarily risky and costly for reasons I can go into if we want, but I don't think it's the smartest way to do things. I think what you want to do is be customer centric, in the sense of your core imperative as a business is to understand who you're trying to serve, what they need from you, and how you serve them. And then you think about, all right, how do our customer teams, our sales teams, marketing teams, etc., organize under that imperative, whatever it is specifically in your business. In the case of Charlie, we have the product teams, or part of the product teams, the PMs specifically, the product managers, the sales org, and the marketing org all reporting to me. The customer team reports into our Chief Operations Officer, and some other functions in the business, such as our engineering team, reports into the CEO. Now, a big part of the reason why this works for us is what I described. Myself, the COO, and the CEO, if I do say so myself, we have an excellent relationship. We understand each other very, very, very well. We understand the imperative that sits above all of us. So it's not like, oh, I want to do this with my team, so, why are you getting in my way? It's like, this mission sits above all of us. So that is the thing we're trying to do. If I'm pushing in a direction that gets us away from that, the COO can tell me, hey, Timi, I don't think that doesn't fit this. It's like, oh, okay, you're right. If the CEO does the same, I can tell him. So I think those are the most important components, actually. Like, understand the operating philosophy of the business and why that is the right one for I use the term mission more generically. I'm not like talking about mission statements or whatever. It's like, what is this business trying to do in the market? And then, like, what roles are these functions going to play in that? as a leadership or executive team, you decide those things, then whomever is leading them, you just need to hold each other to account. Hopefully that makes sense. And just to add, the reason why I made that point is I think sometimes people get lost agonizing about the structure. Oh, should it be a sales rep? Should it be? It's like, I think that's less important. Any of them can work if you get these foundational principles right.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Timi. I think it's not that we're sitting here saying that salespeople don't make good CROs, because there are brilliant CROs who are extremely good salespeople, but it's because they have that dynamic that Timi's talking about, which is that they kind of come together with a shared understanding and purpose, if you like. They know why they're doing it. They know why they exist. They also know how to communicate with each other. And then you've kind of got the trifecta, haven't you, of a good setup, so that, as a CRO, you are doing all those things because you are interested in how the teams work together. You are effectively communicating with the other people around you. And you do also understand what does your customer want, and that's the driving force behind it. I think so many people in that position get very hung up on the number, and therefore they kind of go, oh, but we're not hitting our targets, and so they drive that number really, really hard, and they forget about the purpose of why the business exists in the first place and what their customers truly want and need. And then everything becomes about the number. And then also what happens then, I think, and you guys have probably seen this as much as I have, is that it puts that CRO, who is potentially a very senior salesperson, into an extreme position of power. So there's this huge imbalance where everyone is just like beholden to the number and beholden to that CRO, and is kind of like, we are not worthy because we are not able to do that, because we've kind of forgotten why we exist in the first place. That's slightly existential, but I've seen that play out so many times. I don't know if you guys have as well, and what your thoughts are on that.
I'm trying to think about how many CROs I've actually worked with, closely enough, not just as a fractional, because that's different. Yeah, on the one hand, the number is the number, right? Usually, and that is the thing we're trying to go for. But yeah, it all conversations then end up with basically being like, okay, how do we get sales more stuff to do more stuff, right? It's not how do we look at what we're doing and actually evaluate if what we're doing is right to try to get to where we want to. I've just used the most generic language possible, sorry. But it becomes very, you're in a box. You're basically thrashing in a box about how do we get sales more leads, and you're not fixing the external potentially problems or misalignments that are actually causing the sales number to not be as healthy as you might want it to be.
100%. I think one of the biggest mistakes, one of the biggest and most pervasive mistakes that startups and scale-ups make is they see the number as a goal rather than a side effect. The number is the most important thing, don't get me wrong, because at the end of the day, you you don't get the resources you need to operate as a company, i.e. money, a lot of the time if you don't progress numerically. But the money, the target, is just a proxy for value. And in the same way that hitting a target is important for an archer, but the thing the archer should focus on is their technique, their breathing, their strength, their posture, etc. It's the same with a company. If you're not hitting your number, the reaction a lot of companies have is raise the target and get more expensive, especially like a CRO-led company, and get more heavyweight salespeople. I have literally never seen that work. Literally. It may have worked somewhere, I don't know. But I've been in some hyper growth companies and I've literally never seen it work. Yet it is this reflexive approach that a lot of startups and scale-ups have. And the reason is the number is a side effect. It is a side effect of how well you understand the game you're playing relative to the market you're in and the competitors you're playing against in service of your buyers. Now, that is as hard as it sounds, which is why people avoid it. The reaction is like, we don't have time for that. Who has time to go and start understanding like what are our market dynamics. And this is where you get like a sort of compounding effect, because a lot of companies hire these types of CROs or even executives who are not what's the word, haven't been battle hardened in the context of doing things like that, understanding market dynamics, your role in them, how you generate value, how you maximize value for customers. So they don't know how to solve those problems quickly. So that reinforces in the minds of the investors and the CEO that, oh, when you try and do that stuff, it is necessarily slow, which I don't think is true. It doesn't have to be rushed, but you don't, understanding your customers, gaining insights, etc. It doesn't have to be this year-long, laborious transformation journey. They're like very direct ways you can go and learn about things and analyze and solve problems. So they get further and further away from that. And I know it's a horrible time for SaaS companies and for small businesses, as we know, because a lot of them are getting hit. And I'm going to say this not to be insensitive, but because I really think I've personally been part of the process where it has saved companies before. So if there's one piece of advice I can give to these companies and their leaders is please reevaluate the way you think about your commercial operations. Because I know for at least some of these companies that are struggling, it is because they have these very simplistic target, hire more expensive people to hit targets. That mentality is kind of how they've ended up in the level of vulnerability that they are. And actually, you need to rethink what it means to be commercial. It's not just like banging the drum and like, sell more stuff.
Yeah,
it's
just sell it to anyone.
About understanding. Exactly. Drop the price, do unethical shit. We need to understand that the money that comes in is a proxy for value. And what you need to do is get really good at understanding what do people value? What do people value in your product, in your sales process, in your marketing, in your customer interactions? Rinse and repeat. What do people value enough to part with their money? That is the task. When you understand that, everything gets easier. Everything gets way easier. So I think just to tie back, the money, the target is a side effect. Hitting it is a side effect. It's the most important outcome, but it should not be your most important focus.
We're talking about the number being the most important thing, but being, I guess, an indicator of how well you're doing in terms of everything else. So as a CRO, because you are dealing with so many different functions in the company, what are some of the key metrics that you hold yourself accountable to, and what are the things that you really focus in on and care about on the day-to-day of your job, basically?
Good, very good question, because we're in the process of doing some important work. Some of it I can reveal, some of it I can't. But what I will say is, I think coming into the role, and even the director of revenue role before this one, the dynamic was very typical in the sense that this new business, this MRR, these are the big numbers, and that's okay. It's an okay starting point. What would have not been okay was for me to have stayed there and just been like, yeah, let's keep hitting those harder. What I have started to do, and what my teams and I have started to do, is to understand those indicators of value cross-functionally. So marketing team, it's not just, are you getting leads? Are you getting opportunities? It's like, what are the best possible opportunities you can create for our sales team based on these parameters? Let's measure that. We measure everything else. We still measure opportunity, but that becomes our kind of pillar of like, okay, you are creating asymmetric value for the business, in the sense that you're not just going for volume and throughput, just more and more and more and more. You're raising the quality as well. The product team, it's like, what is your metric that the kinds of engagements you are generating amongst our users and our customers is correlative with or predictive of increasing value for them and for us. So for them, that they are getting the value that they need from the product, and that they will pay us more for it. That becomes a key part of our revenue picture. And of course, the same with the sales team. It's not just how many demos did you did, how many did you do, how many deals did you close. It's how are you closing our best customers? How are you closing everybody else? And how well do you understand why we are closing them? So that becomes a sort of metric or metric family. I think for product, it's what a lot of people try and capture in like North Star metrics and stuff like that. But essentially what I'm saying is we're creating a layer of metrics at the highest level within those functions that correlate with or predict our ability to generate revenue. Because revenue is so lagging. If you're a CRO, it is not in your interest. And I've seen a number of CROs tripped up by this actually. It is not in your interest to go to the end of the journey, sit next to the revenue and look at that. Because by the time something's going wrong, it's going to take you forever to realize. And then it's going to take a very long time to correct it. So for me as a CRO, personally, I don't want to do that. Obviously, I still have my hand on the tiller. I'm still watching the revenue. But I want more strategically informative and timely metrics to help me go, the marketing team isn't quite doing what it needs to do. Yes, our opportunities are going up, but there's something's broken here. Those opportunities aren't going to turn into money, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it basically means that you've got that full picture of everything that's happening from before someone enters the funnel, if we want to talk about it as a funnel, all the way through to them renewing, and that there's quality, and that you're actually able to then serve those customers in the long run. And that is definitely I think that's where people I think that's another place where people trip up, as they're like, just get them in the door, worry about it later. That attitude, which also will not serve you in the long run. And even though that means, therefore, like we said, you'll be able to hit your number, what will happen later is that you don't get all of the good stuff that you get when you have the quality, when the quality does come in the door, like renewals and referrals and expansions and all those other avenues where you can generate revenue. People always think about all of that stuff as kind of like a mystery that we'll worry about later, we'll come back to. But the way you're talking about it, Timi, is that's part of the structure. It's like we create value, we are consistently looking at quality, and therefore we know that the people that we're bringing in, we're actually able to help them and therefore renew and retain them in the long run, which is that's a very different world to be operating in, I imagine. Does it, in terms of the way that feels for your team, I would, because that does feel very different to the way a lot of teams operate, has that been difficult for them to kind of get on board with, or are they kind of enjoying the process? What's that like?
It's such a good question. It's been the core of my work for the last few months. I think a few things help me and help us. I love my team. We work well together, and we have high expectations of one another. So what that means is when I say, because the other thing is coming up to this period, like I would say from middle of last year or so, the teams had been putting up record numbers in a number of areas. And then I come in and I say, hey, everyone, I know you're doing a great job, but I'm going to mix this up and change it entirely. Well, not entirely, fundamentally. It was hard, not in the sense that anyone resisted it. Everyone was keen, because once it takes multiple sessions, mirror boards, etc. Once I'd explained what we're trying to do, it was like, yeah, that does make sense. It sounds hard, but it makes sense. And then there was a period of, the timing was good because it was coming up to like the Christmas break. I was like, okay, this is usually quieter. Use it to your advantage. Let's get all the messy stuff out of the way here. So there was a lot of meetings, a lot of catching up, a lot of revisions, etc. So I would say it was hard, but just in the sense that it felt complex, because those metrics that I'm talking about as well. So we pretty much have them now for sales, marketing, and product, and for customer success actually. But I'll focus on the functions that I directly manage. They also interlink. So the marketing metric strengthens performance on the sales metrics, which strengthens performance on the product metric. And I insisted that they all had to mesh. So that part is quite, you know, let's face it, most companies, like a PM isn't typically thinking about, oh, how does my, say, let's call them all North Star metrics. How does my North Star metric tie in with the sales and marketing North Star metric? And sales teams definitely aren't doing that. And marketing teams are typically not doing that. So that was the hard part, just kind of getting their heads around like how to
Thinking about
operationalize
them,
it.
right? The other
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Because you're not used to thinking about it in the first place.
Yes. And also it slows you down a bit in the beginning.
Yeah.
Like I want to be honest about that. Like it's much easier to go faster if you're just a marketer going leads, boom. Than leads, but they have to work well for sales and sales, but those sales have to work well for product and product, but that has to work well for customer. The key is we've had to do it. That's always been on my mind. We had to do it relatively fast. And I think this is a pressure that a lot of leaders resent, but I think is healthy to a degree. Like, if my CEO had said, I want you to do it in a week, that's unrealistic. But I was like, this cannot take us like half a year. But that pressure is on me. It shouldn't flow to my teams. I have to figure out a way to make it easy enough for them, painless enough for them to be able to like move through the steps. And now we're coming to the part where those pieces are fitting together, which is quite fun, where it's like, oh, yeah, this thing does support this thing. We're getting validation from our actual data. So, yeah, it's hard. I don't want to pretend to anyone that it's not, but I think it's worthwhile because the position it puts me in is, I have to spend a lot of time thinking about the board. It puts me in a position where I'm not going to be going to the board and saying, what I'm going to do is just get you more and more leads and more sales. It's like, I think people forget the ultimate game of business is cash. We get revenue so that we can get profit, so that we can get cash. So I think of it from that perspective. My job is to increase is to put our metrics in ranges that increase our enterprise value and our chances of a fantastic cash position. And that is a mixture of all those things. It's not just caning the new business dog and trying to get it to do more and more and more. Because you will eventually fail if you do that. There's a ceiling. You will absolutely fail.
There's a definite limit to just doing more of what worked before. Because, I don't know if this is still normal, but in the world of trying to double every year, you can do it for the first few years and then you actually have to do something different to be able to then double again. And like that's literally what feels like it's coming from you. It's like that transformative bit where you're then able to like hit the next level. And not to put words in your mouth, but I assume you were also unable to do that because you guys are doing relatively well and things are relatively non-panic mode maybe, whilst if shit was burning, I assume this kind of thing would be much harder to probably achieve and to have the space for. Am I right to say that?
You're partly right, but it's a very, very important discussion because, like our business is HR software, people, it's seats based in some way. When the economy wobbles, we feel it. And we definitely felt it. We are in a much more stable position now. We're in a great place right now in many ways. But one of the reasons for that is actually I give a lot of credit to my CEO and my senior leadership colleagues for this, is we started this work when things were a bit wobbly. Obviously, I had to do a lot of pitching / getting buy-in to say, look, this, especially in this economy we're going into, these things are important because, especially in our market, because the HR software space, low barriers to entry, highly commoditized, unless you are like extraordinarily innovative, you are not going to like go out there and say something or do something that no one's ever done before, so it's, in many ways, your budget speaks a lot. Like, you can be really good software, but if your competitor has 10 times your budget,
we all
it is
remember what
much
happened when
easier.
Culture Amp got £60 million and nobody could bid on any Google AdWords to do with anything anymore.
Exactly.
Oh, my days.
You can do
now
stuff
it's
like
Hi
that.
Bob.
Oh,
Thanks,
my
Hi Bob.
goodness.
Ruining it for everyone.
Oh yeah, they're everywhere. So exactly, you know what I mean. You guys, you have experience in HR tech. So if you try and play that game in this economy where people aren't buying as much, and we're a business where thankfully, we didn't jump on the crazy VC money treadmill. It's like we have to play smarter. We have to evolve. So the first stage of this was almost like a proof of concept, like a smaller version, just with marketing, then with sales, then with marketing, sales, and product and customer. So that was the difference. So we kind of used some functions as test beds to prove the philosophy, and then we expanded out from there. So in a sense, why I said you're partly right is we definitely had to get to a place of stability before we attempted the grand thing. But we started implementing the philosophy very early on, just in a sort of iterative, smaller, phased way.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, because change can't happen in you can't just rip the Band-Aid off and go, right, this is what we're doing now. Like, that just doesn't work. So Timi, quickly before we end up wrapping up, I'm really interested just to know how, if you're listening and you're either a board member, because we have some board members who listen, or a CEO that's listening in, and you're trying to understand what the CRO's remit is and what they should actually be doing, how can they go about doing that? What should they try and do to sort of maybe either educate themselves or nail that person when they're like hiring? What should they be looking for?
The first step is, Ruta, you won't be surprised with my answer, because you know how I think about these things. I think the first step is actually introspection. It's like, first, if you want to nail that kind of hire, be honest with yourself about what you really want. If what you really want is a really good head of sales who's just going to like max out your sales team, go and get that. Don't set someone up for failure. Don't set a great head of sales up for failure by giving them a CRO title and CRO pressure, but you didn't get someone with a CRO profile, or you didn't set CRO expectations. Because that's the thing, right? Everyone knows, or a lot of people know, the size of the impact they expect from a CRO, but they're not necessarily as clear about what kind of effect a CRO should have in order to create that kind of impact. So I'd say be honest with yourself. The second thing I would say is definitely do not, you can hire a salesperson, you can hire like a sales director or a marketing director, or VP of marketing, VP of sales, VP of customer, and they can make a great CRO, but do not set the expectation that them doing what they're doing now, but better, is how they're going to be a great CRO. And then in terms of educating yourself, so that part is just kind of like what you should like get clear in your own head. In terms of how you learn that, I would say talk to really effective CROs, but a wide range of them. Because
just call Timi.
Thank you. It's almost like, don't get a bias sample. So talk to one with a sales background, one with a customer background, one with a marketing background, but make sure that they are really effective. Your criteria should be that they haven't just built a great marketing team because they're a marketing lead or a great sales because they're a sales. Talk to their CEOs and make sure that they have had a strategically transformative effect on the business. like other things have improved as a result of the way they're doing sales and marketing and customer, etc. And then there's no escaping the work. You need to sit down and like connect the dots, the things they have in common. I would say that's a good starting point, because there is no, and as you asked me this question, I realized this, there is no resource that I'm aware of that's like, that makes it very clear what you should look for in a CRO. I've seen a lot of like very sales led communities or websites. I think Jason Lemkin has a pretty good website, Sastra, where he talks about this kind of stuff. But again, it's very lopsided in my opinion. It's very much like, how do you get like a hotshot sales leader, enterprise closer? It's not more strategic, because that is the flavor of the moment. It may change after this economic crisis. So there is no easy way. It's just a lot of what I've learned is partly through observing CROs who failed and CROs who succeeded, and then connecting the dots. So I'm basically explaining what I did, and then thankfully getting the opportunity to test out some of those conclusions I've drawn and seeing that some of them work, some of them I've refined, but there's no getting around that. But just talk to the people who are like business leaders, not just function leaders as CROs. Make sure it's a wide breadth of functions and connect the dots. But understand that, I would say summarize, understand that you are not hiring a functional leader. If you are hiring a CRO, you are hiring something much closer to a CEO, just with an extreme focus on your commercial functions.
Should we be looking at CEOs as CROs? As in, like, let's say you're CEO of like a small company and then you exit, do whatever, or need a new job because it didn't work out, unfortunately. Will those people make good CROs? Probably, right?
I think so. I think someone who's a good CEO would make a good CRO, because they're used to thinking in that interconnected way, that this is not just about one function, etc. They're used to thinking about the ultimate measure of value. So they're not just thinking about, oh, leads or sales targets. They're thinking, my board is going to want a return at some point. So they're thinking about the enterprise value. They're thinking about cash position if they're a good CEO. And if they're a good CEO, they're great at managing and leading people, which is a big part of the CRO job. And if I may make a last point, is one of the other common mistakes is when you hire someone who does see themselves as like, oh, I'm a hotshot salesperson, whatever. What I see is they keep trying to do that job instead of empower, or I'm a hotshot marketer or whatever. Like they keep trying to do that job instead of understanding that there's the skill they need to prioritize now is how to get someone else to be not just a superstar, but a superstar leader. Because now the people reporting into me lead functions. So it's not just, oh, I need you to do this thing well. I need you to be good at getting other people to do it well. So I think CEOs would make a good CEO is very likely to make a good CRO for those reasons.
Wonderful. I'm just filled with inspiration and hope for the world, and I love talking to very clever people because it's just incredible. So thank you, Timi. I've said this many times before, if Timi had a cult, I would join in a heartbeat. So thank you for being on again. Hopefully it's not the last time. I don't think it will be. And thank you for this insight, and it's been such a refreshing conversation. I think, Emma, you would agree.
Oh yeah, I've
Oh,
got
yeah.
a lot to go away and think about. I'm like, who am I?
Oh,
What do I do?
Timi is also on blameitallmarketing.com. If you do want to reach out to him directly, he's over there. And if you haven't joined blameitallmarketing.com, you should. It's a fun time. Thank you so much for listening, and we will hopefully see you on the next episode.